good to be back with you. I don't know if all of you were here yesterday or not. Today we're moving forward. We're looking at some practical or maybe impractical things that are taking place in our world, those places that surround us currently. I'll start with a story, and this took place not too far from here. Maybe about a 15-20 minute ride, if that. There was some wonderful members of a Lutheran church. I'll just say it, right? It was Trinity Reeds. They're not here, so. And they were members of the church for a very long time. Very, very faithful couple. Always in church, always faithful, raised their family in a very faithful way. They were missing from church for 2 weeks one time. Okay, so I don't know how it is here, Pastor Haller, but Reese, if somebody was mad at me, I would know because somebody would tell me, hey, you made such and such mad, right? If somebody was sick, I always knew that because if I didn't find out about it myself, somebody would call me, or maybe 6 people would call me and say, hey, do you know such and such is sick? And so if they're not mad at me and they're not sick, if they're gone, generally that means they're on vacation, right? And so they weren't there. And so there was a wedding on a Saturday evening for part of the family. And I saw the family at the wedding. And I said, well, hey, how was your vacation? And they said, well, we didn't really go on vacation. We went to a what? We went to a paranormal conference. Okay, has anybody heard of a paranormal conference? One of you. Too bad. I was hoping nobody did, right? It's not something you want to go to. It's one of those things you go to and, you learn about ghosts. And by the way, I don't know if I said it expressly or not yesterday, I do not believe in ghosts, nor should you, except for the Holy Ghost or Spirit. And so it turns out they went to a paranormal conference. And I'm so like, why did you go there? This is at a wedding reception. There's people around, so it wasn't the right place to talk about it. So why did you go there? Well, you see, Pastor, we have ghosts. But we found out that they were good ghosts. Well, they learned that at the paranormal conference. So I said, okay, we've got to talk. And so they met me at church on Monday, because they went to church on Sunday, and Monday we got together, and I said, okay, tell me what's going on. And I would have never guessed this, and nobody in the congregation would have ever guessed that this was going on. And they said, well, the folklore of the area was 2 children died here once upon a time, and so when we moved in the house years and years and years ago, when the house was making noise, somebody just kind of joked, oh, it must be the children. They didn't believe in any of that stuff. They're good Lutheran folks. But they would just kind of make a joke about it. And it wasn't too long before they actually, things started to get noisier. And they started to see children in their house. Besides their own, they had children too. And they weren't their friends, their kids' friends. And then as the kids were growing up, things would get worse. They would get the covers pulled off their beds at night. Sometimes things would get thrown around the room. And so this was many, many years ago. This is, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, something like that. Long time ago. These things were happening. And so they went to, and I was purposely not giving you the time period so you can't figure out what pastor I'm going to talk about. All right. And so they went to their pastor at the time, and they said, hey, this is what's going on in our house. And the pastor was like, yeah, I don't know what to do with that. Why don't you go talk to the Catholic priest on the street? All right, and they weren't about to do that, especially some of us old school Lutherans. I hear the day, maybe some of you can tell me if the stories are true or not, but I hear sometimes the Lutherans wouldn't even walk down the Catholic sidewalk. Make sure they walk on the Lutheran sidewalk, right? And so these are probably these kind of people. And so they didn't go see the Catholic priest. They just went home and lived with it. It wasn't like it was every night or all the time. It was kind of, it would come and it would go. And so they were telling me about all this. And I said, well, okay, well, first off, you don't have ghosts. Well, yeah, we do. We learned that in the paranormal conference, but they're good ghosts. Like, no, you don't have ghosts and there are no good ghosts, right? Not in the sense of a ghost of someone who dies and comes back to life. That's what we're talking about. And so I talked to them. I said, okay, well, one of three things are happening. And when you have something like this happen, it's really one of three things. All right? And so you want to go with the obvious things first. And so the first thing is we imagine things that aren't there. We do it all the time. You know, we see a shadow and we think, oh, there's a face or a person, and it's not. We go, oh, okay, it's not, you know. And so we tend to imagine things. So that's one possibility of what could have been occurring here. It just so happens that it happened over and over again, and the husband and the wife and the children, they were all seeing it, so they weren't imagining it. The other option, it should be an easy one for you to guess. When people are starting to see things, what might be wrong with them? Well, come on, it might be a mental thing, right? You know, you might have some type of mental disease. It could be drug-related or something like that. Not necessarily even just illegal drugs. So maybe you take something, you have, you know, a wrong effect of the drugs. So it could have been that. But once again, this happened over years of time. All the family has seen it, so it wasn't that. And this is a great family, by the way. Wonderful, wonderful Christian family. And so I said, okay, if it's not one of those two things, the only other possibility is it's demonic. They're like, well, we don't like that. You know, they were better with the good ghost thing, right? but they didn't like the demonic thing. Well, and I think I mentioned a little bit yesterday, but in all of I did when I told you the other story that me and Pastor Ostrowski were working on. But in all of our Lutheran agendas we have, you know, I mentioned to you the dedication of the dwelling or the blessing of a home. By the way, the LW version is the best when it comes to that. It's not the best at anything else, but it's the best of that. And so I told the family, I said, well, we pastors, we have, you know, a right for this. It's called blessing of the home, dedication of the home. And I said, really what it is an exorcism of the house. And I said, why don't I come over and do that? They're like, okay, sure, I guess. You know, they're like, well, I'm not sure what's going to happen. You know, they were a good, wonderful Christian family, but they saw too much things on TV and stuff like that, right? So they're really concerned, well, what might happen if I walk in and start to, you know, tell the spirits that I have to leave. And so I go over to the house, and this is like really when I first got here. So I mean, this wasn't recent. This is like when I first got here. That was even before I'd you know, finished my work on any of this stuff or anything like that, these books. And so I made a day, went to the house. It was kind of like like a fall. The leaves rolled down. Maybe it was winter. It was kind of, you know. And so I go to the house, and I'm a little freaked out, to tell you the truth. It's the first time I've ever done anything like this before. So I'm like, you know, what am I seeing? I'm thinking about Hollywood a little bit too, right? I'm thinking, you know, and so I go to the house and I get out and I go to the door and I knock on the door and they open the door and I hear, "Get out!" No, I didn't hear anything. Nothing happened. I'll tell you why I did that in a minute. All right, nothing happened. I went through the house just like your pastor would. I went through and I did the blessing of the home. A few places where they said they have problems. Said some extra prayers. We sang a couple of hymns. And nothing happened and I left. And so I saw them the week after church. I go, how things going? Any problem? Like, no, everything's good. So on the second week, like, hey, any problems? Everything okay? Like, yeah, we haven't any problems, but you know, this thing comes and it goes and it's not here all the time. And we don't think it worked, Pastor. I was like, well, what do you mean? You haven't seen it. Well, why don't you think it worked? And they're like, because nothing happened. See, they were on this mind, kind of like I was playing with you a minute ago. They thought, okay, I'm going to come over and start doing this, and the flies are going to come in the door and the place is going to shake and all this kind of stuff. None of those things happen. And I still occasionally communicate with the family. What is this now? I've been gone for 9 years, so it's probably been 15 years ago. They never had another problem in the house. It's not always that way. Sometimes pastors go back multiple times and things like that. But they never had a problem in the house. And I told you yesterday about a failure of a pastor, and here's another failure of a pastor. Now, we can say, well, the pastor's never learned anything about this topic, and so maybe we cut him a little slack, but I'd say, well, no, because we pastors don't learn all kinds of things in seminary that we're called to do. When we're sent out into the congregation, we adapt and overcome. How's that? For my Marine friends. And so we move forward. So the family hasn't had any more problems at all. But one of the things that I think started all this, because I don't believe in haunted houses either. I'm not saying that demons don't go in a house and cause people problems. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I don't believe in haunted houses where, because of some tragedy or something, the ghosts are there or anything like that. If you want to argue the ghost thing with me, you can throw the scriptures at me. I'll tell you why you're wrong. So if you want to do that, it's okay too. So I don't believe in haunted houses, and they didn't either. And so, what happened here? Why did all this start? I feel like I got chocolate on my face. And they had those blue cupcakes. I was looking at them. I was afraid I'd be blue when I was talking to you today. And I think Tracy was trying to set me up. And so what happened? It's interesting how almost all cities, all areas, they have some kind of folklore. Right? I mean, you drive by this place at a certain time of night and you look here or whatever, you fill it in, right? It's just kind of the folklore of the town, and most of us don't believe it. But when you play with it, you open up possibilities. Now, there were no dead children that were haunting any place, but the devil will come in any way that you let him come. If you're seeking for something, you're looking for something, that's how he's going to show up. Pastor, you're very blessed today. He's ignoring me, but you're very blessed today, Pastor, as always. Yes. But nobody yet has come up to me today and said, when you're not around, hey, my husband who died, he visits me every Friday night. Because I run into this in congregations all the time, in Lutheran churches, that people who are very, very lonely and upset because their loved one has died, they wish they could do anything to communicate with that person, and before long they start seeing the person. A lot of times it starts with a smell of the cologne or the perfume. And they start thinking about it more, and maybe this is God, encouraging me. And before long, they move down, and all of a sudden, here's they're seeing their husband every Friday night, or their wife, or whatever the case is. That's not their husband or wife. The devil will come in any way you want him to come. Luther, he writes about the fact that during his time, people would see apparitions of their dead family members who would come to them and say, I am in such agony here in purgatory. You must go and pay for the Mass for me, or you must go on this pilgrimage because I cannot stand the agony here. And so they would go to the church and they would do these things. In Madagascar, they have something called the reburial practices. And so this is not the Christians, the pagans. And so every 3 years, and many times it's initiated with one of your dead loved ones coming to you, and they say, oh, I am cold here in my tomb. And they have this practice where you have to have this big party, and then you go and exhume the body. You do it every 3 years, so sometimes eventually the body isn't much to exhume, but you do it every 3 years, and you wrap the body up in a new cloth, and then you have this 3-day party, and it's with the witch doctors of the area, and they kind of tell you what to do and stuff like that. So in Madagascar, as I'm studying there, people, they see their relatives coming. So it's interesting. It happens in Luther's time. It happens in Madagascar. But it comes in different ways, right? In Luther's time, it's, hey, you must come and do the Mass for me, or you must do this, right? And that's what the people believed. And in Madagascar, it comes, oh, I'm cold in my tomb. You must come and repent, because that's what the people believe. And so whenever we provide an open door or a belief into these non-Christian and really problematic ways of life, we're opening the possibility for the devil to step in and be who we want them to be. Now, I don't want to get into a debate of Bigfoot and UFOs and things like that, but in my humble opinion, and it's only that, take it or leave it, I think many times it's just the devil showing up what people want. People are looking for the UFOs all the time. It's like, well, all of a sudden they see them, or they're all looking for Bigfoot, and they see him. Once again, if you have a different opinion, fine, keep that opinion. It's only my opinion. It's not, the Bible does not say thus says the Lord. So believe what you want. But I think we have to be very cautious of folklore, of even sometimes just when we don't believe it, playing with these things, because it causes great problem. Indeed, by the way, those people who say that their loved one is coming to see them on a regular basis, and how can you say, Pastor, that's not my loved one, that's the only source of comfort that I receive in this life, is I'm looking for that, when I can at least communicate with my dead loved one who I can't see until the resurrection. And I said, okay, I don't want to argue with anybody at that time. I talk about it ahead of time, but I won't argue with somebody who's in such a state, who's coming to me. I deal with it very pastorally. And I said, well, next time they come, talk to them about Jesus. Talk to them about Jesus' death and resurrection. Talk to them about Jesus' forgiveness. And the ones I've heard back who've done it, their loved ones didn't come up back anymore. Or they got very upset and left. Once again, the devil is always seeking to deceive us, to lead us away to false hopes, false beliefs, false gods, and so forth. So this here is a picture of the Voodoo Temple in New Orleans. And it's not on the main strip. You have to go looking for it. And it's in the front is just a bookstore. And you got to know that if you ask, you can go all through the back where the courtyard is and go in the other back door, and there's the Voodoo Temple. And here's a picture inside the Voodoo Temple, and there's stuff everywhere. So pretty much there's like Buddha, and there's Mary, and then there's the spirits from Africa. Whatever you want is there. And what you're supposed to do is you go there and you find the spirit that you want a blessing from, and then you write your thing on a piece of paper, and of course you put your money. This is just one picture. This place reminded me of these old cartoons. I can't remember who was it. Was it Bugs Bunny or something, right? He breaks into like the genie's thing, and like all this money and gold's like all around him. He's like, ooh, he's swimming in it and stuff like that, right? That's what this place was like. Everywhere you looked, there was, $1 bills, $20 bills, $5 bills, shoved everywhere in this place. And it just so happened it was this young couple. And they were probably, in the mid-20s. I don't know if they're married or not, but they're holding hands together, and they go inside there, and I'm just kind of watching me, and who remembers Adam Lehman? Anybody remember the vicar Adam Lehman? A couple of you do. And so he went with me on this interesting trip of fun, and we were purposely studying these things. And so this young couple comes in there, and so they go over, they find their, whatever, maybe it was Mary, I don't know who it was, and they write their thing, and they put it in there, and they go away. Well, this is a sign that's at the door at this place here. Voodoo Spiritual Temple, enter the door with peace, and all peace will go with you. Enter with true reverence in your heart to receive your blessings. Leave your desires at the altar and your money. It doesn't say that, but and all things will be rewarded to you. As we fully enter into the millennium, you can tell this was a while ago, let us be silent and we will find God. We'll find God in silence, right? This is the God they're looking for. In the silence of our souls, just slow down and listen to the inner peace. Well, it's so interesting. This woman, she was from Africa, an older woman, and so I went and talked to her after the people leave. I said, what are you doing? This is voodoo. You're in, all these gods. They're not marrying. They're all filling in for your your false god. She goes, she's like, shh. We don't want anybody to know that. But this is a place where obviously many people had gone, left their desires, their wishes, and they even had a Jesus in there, a Jesus statue. They had, you fill it in. It was just, you go there and you pick whatever you want to believe in, and hey, enter there with reverence and money and stuff like that, and all will be well for you. This is what's going on in the world. This is what's going on with our neighbors. This is from a picture I took when I was on vacation in Tucson, Arizona. And my wife and I, we stayed at a very nice place this time. It was the J.W. Marriott. Has anybody been to the J.W. Marriott in Tucson, Arizona? Okay. Well, anyway, so I don't know if this is like a Saturday or something. And so we're sitting on a balcony. We got a balcony right there. And all these people start coming up because we have this Native American shaman here. And so he's going to do a cultural thing. You're out in the desert, and it's a Native American country and stuff like that. So he's going to do a cultural thing so that people go to see the cultural show. Well, it wasn't long before he had them all praying to their ancestors, writing their thoughts and prayers to their ancestors on a piece of paper and lighting it. And these were all just tourists who thought, hey, I'm going to go and sit here and watch this cultural show. And I don't even know if they even realized it when they walked away. They were involving themselves in a animistic and really a demonic act without ever recognizing that they were doing it. I used to be up in northern Michigan, and that's where I originally met Dan and Tracy Reinbold and the family. They were members there as well. But I had my children at one of the Lutheran schools in the area, and they had show and tell there one day. And there's a lot of Native Americans in that area, and so one of the children, for show and tell, decided he was going to do their Indian rain dance. Now, the school, for whatever reason, didn't find any problem with this, nor did the pastor, until I kind of talked to him. I said, well, you know what a rain dance is? That means you're trying to grab the attention of your spirits, your ancestors, so that then they would then work on your behalf. That's what animism is, by the way. It's a creator God created everything, but he kind of disconnected himself from everything. And so in order to get favor and to get blessings in the world, you've got to react with the spirit world and stuff like that. And it comes in all different kind of clothing, but it's all the same, really. Whether you're going off to the middle of Africa or off to Asia, and China is very strong in these beliefs, or if you're in the American, Native American Indian group. But once again, this is the stuff that's going on with the neighbors, but I don't think anybody there thought through what they were doing. And I don't think that young couple who were in the Voodoo Temple really thought through what they're doing. They might have just thought of it as, hey, we're in New Orleans. It's kind of like voodoo land, and so hey, let's give this a try. And we become very pragmatic in our time. But does this place look familiar? Forest Lawn Cemetery? It was interesting when I was here, right before I left, so it's been about 9 years ago, and I haven't looked and seen what happened. There was a number of stories in the newspaper that they kept finding the remnants of voodoo ceremonies out in the cemetery at night. Do you remember that?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, so this is stuff, this is around us. All right, this is up here, right? Okay, it's Saginaw, so maybe not really up here, but it's kind of up here, right? It's in the city, but we're still in rural communities. And we had mentioned some of the other things that go on, that went on in the year with the Wiccans and stuff in the area here, and likewise. Anybody remember this place? Frankenmuth? The Psychic Expo. All right, who remembers the Furry Furnace? Blaze? You remember Blaze, the Haitian? He came here and he did the readings for our combined Easter Vigil reading. We know Blaze. So, no, actually, this wasn't Blaze. No, this was Blaze. And so I took Blaze with me, and we said, let's go check out the Psychic Expo. None of you have been there, right? If you have, talk to your pastor following this today. So I thought I'd take Blaze with me. So we went there, and so it was like going to the mall. Well, we had to pay our I don't know, $5 to get in or something like that. Maybe it's more, I don't remember. And you go in there, and it was kind of like going to the mall and people watching. So we went in there, and we kind of have a seat, and you had families coming in, with children, with strollers. And they have seminars there on just really crazy topics. But the real reason people go there is to see the mediums, so that they can talk to their loved ones or find out their fortune or anything like that. Remember the Acts 16 verse that we looked at yesterday? We were reminded that if a medium's real, it means they're dealing with a demon, or they're liars. And so dealing with a demon or liars, either one we want to interact with. But people would go there for that. So in the center of the place, they have various tables and things, and so then all the mediums are on the outside, and so you go and you sign up for the medium you want to talk to, and then you go and you buy your crystals and this and that or whatever while you're waiting, or you can go to the seminar. But it was really interesting. It kind of caught me off guard that the mediums who were there all called themselves reverend. And they didn't talk about their spirit guides like they used to in the old days. Well, my spirit guide told me. But they talked about their angel guides, which is actually more correct. Yeah, they're fallen angel guides, but they're angel guides. All right, and so this is a moving show, and so I talk about this all over the place, and it's been in most places that I talk about. It's a traveling group that goes around. They're actually based in Indiana, which is kind of interesting. But before I get there, they had their own vacation Bible school program. Star Magic. Of course, during the craft time, like when we're making little Jesus signs and crosses, they were making occult symbols, and then they were, instead of praying, they were learning how to say spells. And this is something that they actually sell and propagate around. So here's where they're based. And if you want to look this up, you can. Camp Chesterfield in Chesterfield, Indiana. And it's about 2 hours south of the seminary in Fort Wayne. They've been around since, and I have to look it up, but I think it's like 1870 or something, and it's the largest spiritualist community, they say, in the U.S., and you go there to be ordained in the spiritualist church. And so here's some of the classes. Oh, so 1886, that's what it was. So you can go there to be a medium missionary. Beginning Bible study. Why would they have Bible study? Because the devil misuses the Word of God all the time. They have counseling, intro to the seance room. Oh, great. Laws of mediumship. You can read it there. They have an associate minister program. Basic unity of religion. So we're all kind of the same. It's almost like that earlier thing I put up there from the voodoo temple. Death and dying, natural law. New Testament and Old Testament. Preparation for ministry. Sermon prep. Yeah, they have sermons. Or you can be ordained. Right? I always tell my children, there's two worlds that live side by side. And most of the time, we don't interact with the other ones. There's kind of like what we would consider kind of like the normal world where people go to work and they go to school and they go to church and they're generally good people. But you can have somebody right next door to you that, unknown to you, might be involved in really all kinds of bad stuff. Not just spiritual stuff, but crime and drugs. And a lot of times you just would never know it. But these things live side by side. And so I'm not trying to depress you, but I am trying to show you what's living side by side us all the time. That's really not that big a problem for us because it's always been that way in the world. This isn't new. It's becoming more prominent and it's not in the shadows anymore, but it's always been there. You go back to the 70s, you go back, to the 18s, whatever. It's always been there, or even back to biblical texts. The difference is it's coming out of the shadows nowadays. And that's that's depressing, and we wish it wouldn't happen. That's not the real problem. The real problem is we're not noticing it. Or we're only noticing it on the outward side, but we're not noticing the deeper spiritual problems. And sure, the in-your-face stuff we get, right? I mean, the voodoo stuff in the cemetery. Okay, yeah, right, that's weird. I can't believe this is going on. But the other stuff is the more subtle stuff that comes our way. So, any questions or anything up to this point before I move on and talk about some other things? Nothing. Oh, man. Yes, go ahead.
So, you were saying that demons work through these things that, under the guise of faith. You hear about these faith healers and stuff like. Is that also the way the demonic manifests itself?
All right, so I won't talk about the faith healers. I'll give you a different example, but guess what? It will fit. All right, so I'm kind of strange, if you haven't figured that out yet. And so I've taught in Haiti a lot of times, and Pastor Ostrowski used to go with me, and I would take vicars and stuff like that. And Pastor Ostrowski may have told some of you back then, if you remember. But when I wasn't teaching, I'd take whoever wasn't teaching, and we'd go interview voodoo priests for fun. Well, I was working on these thoughts and these books and stuff like that. I was supposed to write a third book that I was going to incorporate all this in, and I just decided I didn't want to do it. But, and so I'm talking to this voodoo priest. He's telling me how powerful he is, all these things he can do, and how he can heal people, and all this kind of stuff. And his son's sitting there playing, and the road's like right here, and nobody stops on this road, right? You're on the road, you're dead. And so the kids are playing. I said, well, I said, that's interesting. If your son went out there and a car came by and it hit your son and it broke his leg, can you heal that? Well, no, I can't heal that. well, what can you heal? He goes, I can heal spiritual things. So it's kind of interesting and how this plays out. And so once again, the devil will do anything, be anything you want him to be. And so, and these are non-believers, all right? So they can be attacked differently than we can. Remember, the only real tools the devil has against us Christians is fear and lies, which are as effective as he needs. But that's all he has for us. But for these other people, he will actually bring physical sicknesses on them and then send the voodoo priest to take it away. And guess what happens? Everybody looks to the voodoo priest as that powerful person, that there's something special about the voodoo priest, and so they all go looking after him. Same thing happens with these faith healers, I would say. It's not a real healing that's taking place. A lot of it's just plain fake. And sometimes you can't explain it. And but you can look at what is revealed in what these people say. And they are not confessing Christ, not in the Christ of Holy Scripture. It's kind of like these people here, right? They're confessing Christ, but they ain't the Jesus we know. Right? And so if it isn't fake, it's coming from someplace else. And where it's coming from is not something we want to engage with. Now that's different. A faith healer is different from being healed miraculously. I think most of us pastors, and we've been pastors long enough, we come upon something we can't explain. Like for me, we had a wonderful retired pastor at my first church that came, and it wasn't for him, they probably would have chased me out with pitchforks. But he settled everything down, and he was a wonderful man. And so he went to the doctor because he was having some problems, and he had colon cancer. And they took a biopsy, and they, yep, it's colon cancer. They scheduled him in to have the sectioning take place, and nothing special. I mean, we all prayed for him at church and stuff, just like you would for anybody else. So they go in, they set up the date for the surgery. They go in to do the surgery, and it's gone. All right? We shouldn't expect God to act that way, but if he chooses to, he can. But there was no faith healer saying, you're healed, or something like that, right? So God can still do miracles in this world as he chooses to, but whenever you look at a faith healer or something like that, generally the focus is on him. It's no different than the voodoo priest, who the focus becomes on there. So long explanation for a short question. Sometimes us pastors, we just blab and blab and blab. Yeah.
You talked about opening yourself up to different things. Can you speak on like reading material, because there's that sci-fi fantasy world of stuff?
Yeah. See, and the thing I think we have to watch for here is we can't say, all right, you shouldn't read any of the sci-fi or fantasy or this, right? Because what affects one person isn't going to affect another person. And a lot of it is, how far are you going into this thing, right? It was the whole thing about, what was it, Harry Potter for, years ago when I kids were young. Should we let them, read it or not? Or, should we, burn all the books or whatever the case is? You know what? For most people, it wasn't an issue. For some people, it was. But usually it wasn't the material itself, there was other things going on, and so they got into it where they shouldn't be. So the thing is, safety is an illusion. Me and Dan were talking about this last night. Safety in our world is an illusion. Right? Especially when we look at things like we were reminded yesterday through Scripture and so forth, from a spiritual sense. We look at it from our security sense. We live in pretty safe places, but something could happen, and occasionally it does. And so we're not safe, and there's no way to make the world around us safe. But we should be cognizant, especially as parents, for instance, if we know that our children are very influenceable and things like that, maybe they shouldn't be reading such things. Or maybe as adults we shouldn't be reading. such things. But other people can read the same thing, and your pastor may have a different view on it if he does. Like I said, this is just my view. Anything else before I move on? All right, what about this? One of the essence of animism is trying to get power over something. All right? So you might be worshiping the spirits, but you're doing so really so you can manipulate them into doing something you want. Or magic, for instance. Not the magic tricks, pull the rabbit out of the hat stuff, but the occult type of magic type things. The whole idea is if you know the right spell or whatever the incantation, that there's power in the words, and by the way, I don't believe there is, but this is what they believe. And so if you just say the words just right, it's about manipulating those words to get something you want. Or amulets and talisman. If you wear this special, in many parts of the world, you wear this special medallion, you don't have to worry about the evil eye. Anybody ever heard about the evil eye before? When people kind of look at you like, kind of thing. And, they curse you by looking at you, and bad things happen to you. And so if you wear this, they can't do it. But the devil's kind of tricky, and so animism invading Christianity. I gave you one example yesterday. I gave you the example of the holy water, right? You see it in the movies and stuff like that, right? Throw the holy water. All right. So yes, when I was younger, I watched unhealthy movies, right? But I remember watching, I think it was called The Lost Boys. Anybody seen it? You don't have to raise your hand if you're afraid. Some people go, yeah, I saw it. All right, so it's a vampire movie, and one of the parts I loved about it, even when I was younger, and I think that came out somewhere in the 80s or something, right? And so they're dealing with these vampires, and they're like, what are we gonna do? They're coming to get us, and so they go get this holy water, and they basically, I can't remember how they got it there, they fill the whole bathtub with this stuff. Then they get super soakers. Does anybody remember that? Some of you remember that, right? And so the vampires come in and they're like, the vampires go, Yeah, I liked vampire movies when I was a kid. And so I remember how appalled I was when I watched one of them. This way before I, of course, ever went to seminary or anything. And, I was so afraid of vampires when I was a little kid. I used to sleep with a crucifix under my pillow. Right? It's like, something happens, I'm good. I'm ready to go. And so I remember watching one of the vampire movies, and I was completely appalled because, the vampire comes. By the way, there are no vampires. I don't believe in vampires. Just be clear, right? All right. So the vampire comes, and so the person pulls the cross up, and guess what happens? The vampire reached up and goes, and falls in dust, kind of. I'm like, I can't believe Hollywood did that. All right, until I learned a little theology. It's like, yeah, they're kind of right. Right? I mean, they were making a talisman. They were giving power to a material thing. So, how we deal with crosses. Now, there's a right use of the cross. I have crosses all over my house, right? But they're not providing a spiritual power. They are a visible representation of Christ and what he has done for us. They are the gospel in a visible, just like stained glass windows or anything else, right? It's another picture of the gospel of who Christ is for us. But when we start to install a spiritual power in it outside of that which it's representing, we're turning it into a talisman no differently than somebody would turn, say I've got to wear this particular thing so I don't have this problem. Because now I'm hitting home. Because how many of us wear crosses around our necks? It is a wonderful practice. Keep doing it. You know, buy them for your family. It's great. It becomes a problem now when you think that it's almost like that medallion that will keep the evil eye away from us. I talked yesterday about Acts 16, and when Paul said, in the name of Jesus Christ, depart, that medium, and it said, the Spirit left her that very hour. And if you remember, one of the points I made is, I think one of the significance of that is, so we see that, and that's why Acts 19, I think, is tied with it. And so we see that it's not about magical words. It's about Jesus and his presence, who is the one fighting on our behalf, the one removing the devil, the one who's caring for us, loving us, sending his holy angels to keep us safe in various circumstances. But it's not power that's endued in a object. Or my little angel pin on my, how many people I'm making mad today? All right, my little angel pin on my visor, you know, it's going to keep me safe. Sure, God says he sends his holy angels to be with us, that the evil foe may have no power over us, that indeed it's something that we can't see, and if we dig into it too much, we start to get in trouble, but we trust that it's a part of our faith. But to put something like that and to kind of think that, okay, I'm safe. Now it's different. You're putting it in there and you're just like, oh, I'm thinking about God sending his holy angels to be with me. Okay, that's great. Right? But as soon as I put it in there, now let's put some kind of emphasis in it. So there's some examples. So what are some more?
Icons.
Icons. Sure. I love icons. I've got icons all over my office. All right? But, so Pastor, what are they? What's the Orthodox view of icons?
They are windows into heaven, passageways to speak and pray to the saints.
Which is really interesting because the statues in Hinduism are the same thing. They're windows into heaven. Or, you know, they're representing, and more than just like a physical representation of the gospel, that they're connecting you to that person in the icon. Icons are beautiful. I mean, like I said, I really enjoy icons. I used to do that at Reese all the time. You know, they had the screens there, and I really didn't like the screens too much. They're not surprising anybody. I told them that there too. So on the screens, they became closed communion screens when I was there, and we would have an icon representing the gospel text for the day. And then they would put the liturgy up there later, but that was kind of how I used them. So icons are great because they give us wonderful, artistic, beautiful pictures. You know, like you got on your wall in your sanctuary or over here. Wonderful representations of the gospel. But that's what they are. They're just visible forms of the gospel. But we tend to over-spiritualize things. And whenever we over-spiritualize things, we're moving outside of the realm of Christianity, and we're moving into the realm of paganism. Somebody else had a hand up here about something. But when you start to think about it, there's all kinds of things. People, they ask me, well, can you give me a liturgy of exorcism? You know, they just want, they want, you know, they don't want to use the Roman Catholic one because, okay, that's bad, it's Roman Catholic. So can you give us something? And I tend to say no. Except for the general liturgy that we do. I showed it the other day, right? Baptism, confession, absolution, reading the scriptures, Lord's Prayer, you know, maybe more blatant prayer, be gone in the name of Jesus, hymns, you know. But the reason I'm cautious of this is because people are looking for, just give me the words to say, and then I'll be okay. Rather than, you know, so putting too much trust in the words. Now, it's different from the divine service and things like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about coming up with these additional things and then finding some spiritual power in them apart from themselves. Do you think of anything else?
The cardinal. Some people think a cardinal.
Yeah, I never heard of that before until the other day. Someone around here was telling me about that.
Big conversion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, cardinal? Yeah, I see cardinals all the time. Right? I got him in my backyard. He lives there. But yeah, I mean, we start to put these spiritual. Another thing that really stands out to me And once again, I'm not trying to fault anyone who's doing these things. I'm saying we have to watch how we view them. Because we see a lot of on a lot of corners of the road, little displays with a cross and maybe flowers, and it seems like there's always new fresh flowers there every time you drive by. Now remember, that person's probably buried someplace. So if you want to go remember them, maybe the tomb would be the place to go, and remember that, this body that has been placed in this ground on the last day will rise from the grave. That's a wonderful way to deal with it. But they do these altars, these shrines on the side, because the person died there, and there's a spiritual thing there. So the person died there, maybe part of that person is still there, and so it's almost like I can be close to that person if I go and I put flowers there all the time. And it might just be done in memory of someone, but too often it becomes more than that. Two people go to the cemetery. They do the exact same thing, right? They go to the cemetery, they get out, maybe they got their kids with them, right? I used to do this all the time with my parents when my grandparents were buried. And so you get out, you got the flowers, it's Memorial Day or something, and you go and you clean up the grave a little bit maybe, and you put the flowers in. And if you're a Christian, you think about, hey, someday I'm going to be in there, and someday when the Lord returns, as we were reminded today in the epistle reading, in an instant and a twinkling of an eye, the dead in Christ are rising, and we are changed. So that body is going to come out of that grave, that same body that we knew, like Job says, right? Even after my skin and flesh are destroyed, yet I shall see the Lord with my own eyes, and not some new eyes, but perfect eyes, not affected by sin. And so that's a wonderful thing that I encourage all of you to do. All right? Different people go out and do the same thing. However, they got some toys with them, because maybe it was a child who died, and the child's lonely at night, and so they need to have toys there for the child. Or maybe they have to go out there and they try to talk with their loved one who's there. All right, as soon as you've done that, you've taken this from a wonderful, blessed Christian promise of the resurrection, you've turned it into an animistic practice. But the thing is, on the outside, you can't tell the difference. Two people go to I thought about this, because one of the African students said, well, you guys do the same thing. And he said this, he goes, you guys, I said, yeah, but we look at it really differently than you do. So there's more and more that we can think of. The key for this point here is this, that Christ is the only one. Jesus is the only one that can save us, that can protect us, that forgives us, that renews us. And anytime we take and put power into something else, we have become an animist. We have become a pagan. We're Christianizing things. And the whole thing of Haitian voodoo is, they took all the icons and pictures and put new meanings on it. Pastor, what time are we supposed to be done?
Right on now.
Okay.
What about affirmations?
What about what?
God gives us affirmations and signs.
You know what? I would say that God can do that. I would say as soon as we engage in that, looking for it, we've just opened ourselves up to attack from the devil. Right? We can never limit what God can do. Right? But we do have God's word of what he tells us. And so, for instance, maybe someone dies and you have a dream, and the person in the dream says, hey, I'm okay, I'm with the Lord, the streets are like gold, the picture of Revelation. All right? I would say that I don't think that that's the loved one who came to you and did that. But I would say God lets you have that dream to settle you, to remind you that that person is okay. But as soon as you now look for more of that, or engage in that in any way, now you're almost tempting, looking for something that God isn't there to do. He might grant you this solace right after the death of someone or something, but as soon as you start looking for this reoccurring thing or going out looking, that's when you're opening yourself up for these problems. But once again, the real problem is we don't know if these things are from God or not. And so if they give us solace because we have that dream or something, great. Right? But don't engage in more. Anything else? This is kind of weird doing this for Bible study because we spent all the time yesterday on the Bible stuff, but this was meant to be the conclusion of our time together. So I had you ask questions. So thank you very much for your time. And we have one more back here, Pastor Getaway.
Yes.
How can you differentiate between demonic influence and just sinfulness? And then do you address it?
Well, first off, I think we go back and we look at Luther when he was talking, when we were reading of the Catechism yesterday. He reminded that we're not under occasional attacks, any of us. We're under insistent attacks. So there probably isn't a time where the devil is working with those additional problems that we have as well. So we all need to have the devil removed from us. That's one thing I didn't mention. Like in Madagascar, I said, well, when do you do an exorcism? When somebody's oppressed or they're possessed? I go, who cares? If somebody's being harassed by the devil, you do an exorcism. But your point is a good one, because you take the devil away. The evil that exists within us is capable of the most horrific things alone, apart from the work of the devil. Problem is, because of that sinful side in us, we're already more apt to engage in those things that he helps entice us to do.
So there's no
So the answer is no, I don't know.